Okay, let's dive right into this explainer and uncover the General George Patton true story. We're going to look at the meticulous method behind the madness of World War II's most iconic and honestly, probably most misunderstood figure. Listen to this colorful description from the press back in the 1940s. It perfectly captures the oversized, dramatic myth of Patton that completely captured the American public. To the media and the masses, he was this swashbuckling, profane cavalryman, a guy who literally promised to duel Erwin Rommel in a personal tank battle, making Hollywood adventure heroes look like drugstore cowboys. But, that Hollywood caricature hides a much deeper reality. So, to truly understand his success, we're going to look past the legend and follow this roadmap. First, the myth versus reality. Second, pioneer of the tanks. Third, the information innovator. Fourth, the Lorraine crucible. And finally, Bastogne and beyond. Let's get right into it. Section 1. The myth versus reality. There is just an absolutely stark contrast between his aggressive, media-driven nicknames and his actual day-to-day habits. While the troops affectionately called him Old Blood and Guts or Iron Pants, the real Patton was a profoundly devoted student of military history and theory. I mean, think about the irony here for a second. A swearing, tough guy general known as Iron Pants was secretly a huge devotee of romantic poets like Kipling and Burns, and he was even a published poet himself. He combined this deep theoretical preparation with practical experience, which gave him an incredibly solid foundation to sort of play the role of the spectacular leader everybody expected. Section 2. Pioneer of the tanks. Now, Patton's expertise didn't just happen overnight. He literally built American armored warfare from the ground up over decades. He was actually the very first officer assigned to the U.S. Tank Corps in World War I, setting up a light tank school in France way back in November 1917. He then led those little Renault FT tanks into their first combat at Saint-Mihiel in September 1918. Fast forward to July 1940 at Fort Benning, and we see Patton bringing the 2nd Armored Division to life. He famously said he had 16,000 men who had never seen an officer, and 1,200 officers who had never seen a man. He tirelessly drilled them, taking his deep understanding of cavalry mobility and converting it into modern mechanized warfare. Section 3. The Information Innovator. Patton didn't just attack blindly, right? He utilized a highly systematic framework to maintain a crazy high battlefield tempo and just totally overwhelm his adversaries. It wasn't just his bravery, but his revolutionary approach to data and communication that truly built his legacy. These 4 calculated steps really anchored his entire combat philosophy. Number 1, surprise him. Find out what the enemy intends to do and do it first. Number 2, rock him back on his heels and never give him a chance to get his balance. 3, relentless pursuit, what the French call à l'outrance, meaning beyond the limit. And 4, mop him up. Seeing it laid out like this really proves his actions were deeply methodical, not just impulsive. A lot of Patton's motive for gathering information was captured right there in that second tenet, rocking the enemy back. By mastering this concept of getting inside the enemy's decision cycle, Patton used rapid information to act so quickly that the adversary just couldn't successfully recover or counterattack. Now, this idea of getting inside the decision cycle is a total staple of modern business and military strategy today, but Patton was pioneering it back in the 1940s. He demanded reconnaissance up to 150 miles ahead of his lines. For him, information was a tool to obtain speed, and speed was how he prevented the enemy from ever bouncing back. To achieve this blistering speed while preparing for operations in France, Patton realized normal command channels were just way too slow. Detail and time were being lost. So he got creative. He modified the 6th Cavalry Group, essentially turning them into the 3rd Army Information Service, or AIS. They completely bypassed normal channels, monitored radio nets, and ran liaison patrols to broadcast a rapid, common picture of the battlefield straight back to his headquarters. A real game changer. Moving on to Section 4, the Lorraine Crucible. But, as we know, every perfect system eventually hits real-world friction. Following the lightning-fast breakout from Normandy, Patton's 3rd Army was advancing in all directions at once. It was going so well that Allied generals actually assumed the war would be over by summer's end. In fact, early intelligence estimates projected Allied forces wouldn't even reach the area around Metz until 330 days after D-Day. Top-secret ultra-intercepts even suggested the Franco-German border was completely undefended. However, the geography of Lorraine tells a very different story. It's bounded by the Moselle and Saar rivers and flanked by mountains. It's a traditional invasion route that's literally seen centuries of conflict.
When you combine this incredibly difficult terrain with the reality that Patton's forces were totally outrunning their own supply lines, well, that rapid advance suddenly ground to a very frustrating halt.
350,000. Let that sink in for a second. That staggering number represents the gallons of gasoline the Third Army required every single day just to keep moving. It became a literally impossible demand when they were positioned 500 miles away from the Normandy's supply beaches, even with the famous Red Ball Express running non-stop convoys to try and get it to them.
Suddenly, this data-driven, fast-paced machine was bogged down by a perfect storm of friction points. They were logistically starved and lacking gas. The pause in momentum allowed the Germans to massively reinforce the area under Army Group G. On top of all that, the weather was just horrendous. Because the European theater quartermaster stubbornly believed the war would end before winter and refused to order new winter uniforms, the soldiers suffered terribly. Freezing conditions and trench foot caused 95% of non-combat casualties, and tragically, that equaled the actual combat casualties that November.
During this grueling period, Patton's command structure was heavily trimmed down, consisting primarily of the XX and 12th Corps. But despite fighting on a broad 60-mile front with depleted strength and terrible weather, Patton adapted. He leaned heavily on his Army Information Service and his dedicated liaison officers to maintain a constant flow of intelligence. Because of this, he managed to survive what would be the bloodiest months of his entire command.
Section 5, Bastogne and Breakout. Ultimately, the true test of his genius and his information systems arrived in the freezing winter of 1944. Because he demanded a constant, real-time flow of intelligence from his G2, Colonel Koch, Patton habitually kept his staff planning ahead by 2 whole operations. He was never caught completely flat-footed. So when the massive German counteroffensive in the Ardennes kicked off, Patton had the vision, the data, and the intuition to seamlessly pivot his army north toward Bastogne to relieve the besieged paratroopers.
His seamless integration of intelligence, liaison officers, and rapid communication really proves he wasn't just a tank commander. He aligned his organizational structure with the technology of his day, like radios and light aircraft, and maintained incredible organizational flexibility. In doing so, Patton essentially created the blueprint for what the military today calls multi-domain operations, or MDO. He managed information to gain the absolute ultimate operational advantage.
It's such a fascinating juxtaposition, isn't it? The rugged, swearing general who actually relied on poetry, history, and cutting-edge data management to win. As we wrap up today's explainer on the General George Patton true story, I'll leave you to ponder this question. How can today's leaders balance the rapid flow of technological data with the irreplaceable human intuition, drive, and vision that Patton possessed? It really challenges us to see that the most effective leadership, whether in 1944 or today, requires both a mastery of information and an absolutely indomitable spirit. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.